Today, I'd like to welcome and introduce you to our first Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Diane Ariza. Diane joined us in July, and her appointment here at Southern mirrors an important trend in higher education. The number of chief diversity officers is on the rise, reflecting a growing and a needed focus on issues of diversity, inclusion, discrimination, bias, and harassment on college campuses. However, we didn't make this decision in response to a major campus incident, as many do. We decided that we needed strategic leadership that will take us to the next level of commitment and change. Diane can't do it alone. It takes each of us to recognize, acknowledge, and challenge our biases. We must continue to join together to build a campus environment where equity, inclusion, and diversity become a part of everyday campus life. In recent years, we've already done some great work promoting anti-racism and social justice, including the creation of the Racial and Intersectional Justice Group, our recent campus climate survey, the Racial Justice Pedagogy Project, Social Justice Month, gender equity programs, and so much more. With Diane's leadership and guidance, we will be able to enhance and expand these important initiatives. As an institution committed to the values of social justice, it's critical that we have a focused emphasis on addressing the systemic racism laid bare nationwide during the pandemic. We must acknowledge that racism and bias exists on our own campus and in our campus community. And we must work together tirelessly to identify and dismantle the systemic processes that disproportionately harm our students of color. So Diane, welcome to Southern. We're delighted that you're here. And if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to Southern.
Yes. Well, I have to say that it probably would have to begin with my childhood, growing up in a biracial, bicultural, bilingual community in Puerto Rico. And having parents that did not go to college, I have to say that it wasn't a matter whether I was going to go to college or not, but where I was going to go. And I think that inspiration with my experience growing up in Puerto Rico really provided the framework for where I am today.
Wow, so I'm learning a lot about you just in these few minutes. Well, this is a new position. You're the inaugural VP for DEI here at the university. And so I'm curious to know, we've seen a lot happen in recent years, but in particular in recent months. So a lot of powerful conversations that are happening. And so I'm curious to know what you see as perhaps the biggest equity and inclusion-based issue or issues that are facing college campuses, that are facing Southern.
That's a great question, because as I look at the terrain, even just thinking about the chief diversity role is fairly new on a college campus. So when you are comparing this position to a VP for budget and finance or to academic affairs, there hasn't really been a long history of this work. The diversity landscape is not something that has happened over centuries. It just happened over the last, since 1960s, we see a change with affirmative action. So how we're thinking about the work, how do we construct policies, procedures, historically has not been with people in mind of all different communities and backgrounds. And last, I would say that, and you mentioned this early on, that when you hired for this position, it wasn't because we were on fire. It was because we needed to do this. It was the right time to do it. And I think you're seeing a lot of chief diversity officer positions coming into the fold.
I'm really proud of the work we've done here so far. We certainly have a lot to do, but we have been engaged in social justice conversations at least for the time that I've been here, in my 5th year as president. And so, and that's all well and good, but there's so much to do. You've had an opportunity to meet some of the folks here. You've technically you've been here since July 1st, but you really started working with the senior leadership team of the university months before that. So thank you for that, especially since, and thank Nazareth College for that too. That was grateful. And obviously it's an unusual time to be meeting with people, unusual circumstances. I think I'm curious to know what you've learned, what your immediate thoughts are, and has that given you a sense of, okay, now that I understand some of this, a little bit about this community, here's what I want to do?
Yeah, I find that the Southern has been so generous with, I have to say I'm privileged to be part of this community because in learning, and I've spoken with hundreds of people by now, I think, and it keeps increasing, and I'm hoping, and I'll say to anybody who wants to, who hasn't had an opportunity to talk with me, I'd love to meet them. So much more work to do around that and listening and building trust. And I think that takes a long time. But what I've learned is that there are tremendous champions. You said it earlier, that this work didn't happen yesterday. And so there's a great framework, a great baseline for me to continue doing this work. We see other senior leaders that have done this work and continue to do it, but you have to stay true to it. Mm-hmm. So that when you're waking up in the morning or you're beginning your lesson in the classroom, how do you think about that inclusion piece? How do you think about constructing a way of engaging all of your students? Mm-hmm. And I don't think you just put it to rest when things go away or when we're not on fire as we are in this country Sure. right now. But you have to be very attentive to it and mindful about it. So I see that there is some exhaustion from the faculty and staff of color. I also see allyship in ways that I've not seen it at other places. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about how do you hold yourself as a white privilege individual, how does that play out in your everyday? Mm-hmm. So I think that if we get stuck in looking at just discipline, managing only certain disciplines, managing how we do the work, we're going to get into trouble. Sure. But if we can open it up so that we see business and social work and sociology and nursing looking at this work from their lens, I think we can advantage how they are looking at this work through their lens as opposed to seeing it only through one lens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So with that in mind, I think I have two questions. So what is the low-hanging fruit, if you will? What is it that you think we as a community can accomplish and you can help us to accomplish in the next couple of months? How do you think we prepare longer term? What do we need to do now? Because I think that I hear students and members of the community who are allies, who want to be allies, but aren't always certain what to do. I hear that a lot, actually. When we first started talking about social justice in an intentional way, even after we would lay out, well, this is the definition of social justice and here are things that you can do, people would say, I don't understand how that relates to me. That's right. Or how that connects to my work in an area of the university that isn't traditionally academic or it isn't student affairs. Mm-hmm. Therefore, what does that mean for me? So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on.
I think quickly we need to strategize on what does this work mean to you? So identifying what is working. Because I think that sometimes we get caught up in the negatives of what's not, glass half full, half empty.
Sure.
And we tend to go with a half empty. So identifying what do we know about the good work that's happening. So that's critical. And then the second piece to it is where are the shortfalls? And then how do you measure and assess and hold people accountable? And the last thing I'll say about low-hanging fruit is making it meaningful to students so that if you're a business, you're majoring in business or in nursing you can make the case, but you can make it in business too.
I'm just curious to know, there's been a lot of conversation about the cancel culture and whether or not colleges and universities are actually providing students with an opportunity to see multiple perspectives.
It's interesting as we're gearing up for this national election, and I find it interesting that there isn't a space for, and whether you call it civic engagement, the civility to agree to disagree. And I'm finding that, as you were mentioning, if we can't do it in higher education, or if we can't provide spaces for students to be able to inform each other whether we disagree or agree, where can we do that? If we can't, if this is not the place, so I'm finding that we got to be careful with how, censoring is not what we want to do. Freedom of speech and articulating our thoughts is always at the crux of higher ed. That's at the center of how we become critical thinkers and doers. But I'm finding that there's this fine line that we're crossing, that it's either this way or no way. So trying to provide language, whether it's on the political, conservative, liberal spectrum, or how you view financially, whether you're a conservative or liberal on that spectrum, we have to be open. I mean, that the learning just grows deeper and better when you're able to consult and disagree you can agree to disagree, but we become better thinkers and doers. I mean, the research tells us that.
And so you're going to have an opportunity to do that very soon, because next week, as in your new role as vice president, and the new division is actually going to be hosting a forum that hopefully will allow part of that conversation, that courageous conversation, the difficult conversation, and a conversation where folks are encouraged to listen and learn. I think that is scheduled for next week, and it is entitled, and I'm reading here, From Talk to Activism, Southern Students Take the Lead on Racial Justice and Structural Change. So tell us a little bit about that. What do you anticipate?
Well, I was surprised when in my listening circles that faculty and staff were saying, well, I don't think we have many students who are I would consider activists. I mean, back in the day, yes, this was a very active, politically conscious, active campus, but we've lost that. And what I found as I heard faculty and staff talk about what students are doing on campus, and the recent engagement with faculty to say this curriculum needs to be more inclusive, how can we provide more support for DACA students? And then they graduate and they're continuing this work. So I'm not saying that we're 100% social activists on this campus, but you're going to hear students really talk about what that means to them and how they represent this activism, whether it's in the classroom, in their research, or in the work they do on the ground.
Anything else you'd like to share that you think that our community here should know, and where do they find you, by the way?
Well, that's the tricky question, because we're building a division, still not, but we're getting there. So I'm on the second floor of Engelman.
Very good.
And I am in the same suite as Dr. Tracy Turi, who is the Vice President for Student Affairs. And so if you are so open to a social distance with a mask to drink a good cup of coffee, I am very willing to do that too. So students have been reaching out already.
Great.
And again, very excited and privileged to be part of this community. It's been great.
And we'll post a way to reach your office, so that even if folks can't meet face to face, they can certainly arrange to meet with you virtually and engage conversations. And we hope that the members of our community will take the time to do that. In the meantime, the forum will premiere on Facebook Live on Thursday, September 17th from 1 to 2 p.m. Please take the opportunity to tune in and hear the perspectives of our students. Again, the title of that forum is From Talk to Activism, Southern Students Take the Lead on Racial Justice and Structural Change. It should be a terrific event. And Diane, thank you very much. We are delighted that you're here. We're looking forward to the work ahead as we continue to ensure that the members of our community feel welcome, and our 5 pillars, that everyone is being treated with dignity, respect, kindness, compassion, and civility. So, welcome to the Owls.
Thank you.